Evening, everyone. This week's Parsha is Parshas Shelach, Tavshin Pei Vav 5786. We shall begin from the beginning of the Parsha, which is Perek Yud Gimel, chapter 13, Pasuk Aleph, verse 1. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemar. Hashem said to Moshe, saying, Shlach locha anashim, send forth men for yourself, the Asuras Eretz Canaan, and they shall explore, they shall spy out the land of Canaan, Asharnino Yisayin Livnei Yisrael, that I am giving to the children of Israel. Ish echad l'matei abaysav tishlachu, one man from the tribe of his fathers shall you send, kol nasibahem, each one a leader amongst them. So this is where we know Parsha Shlach is primarily focused on the sin of what we call the Chet Hamravim, the sin of the spies that Moshe sent out to look over the land, to explore the land of Canaan, of Israel, before it would be conquered. The spies came back with a very negative report. The Jewish people turned on the idea of going to Eretz Yisrael, and they cried about going to Eretz Yisrael. They wanted to go back to Egypt. Because of that, it was decreed upon them that generation, the men from 20 to 60, would die in the desert, and after 40 years of being in the desert, the next generation would enter the land of Israel. So we're going to focus on the first Rashi. The first Rashi in the Parsha talks about the connection between the end of last week's Parsha and the beginning of this week's Parsha, which Rashi in different places does. Then the end of last week's Parsha is the story of how Miriam criticized her brother Moshe. And because of that, because she spoke what we call Lashon Hara, derogatory speech about her brother, she was punished with saras. And because she was stricken with saras, the Jewish people waited to travel because she couldn't travel. She was basically isolated. That's part of what happens when you get saras. And until she was healed and ready to go, and that's when they went. So that's the end of last week's Parsha. And then after that, we have the story of the spies. So Rashi asks, Lama nismacha, why are they near each other? Why is the story of the Meraglim and the story of Miriam next to each other? So Rashi answers, citing the Medrash, al iske diba shniba b'achia, she was punished because of how she spoke against her brother. Reshayim halalu rov v'loylakhu musar. And these evil men saw what happened to her, and they did not learn the lesson from it. So the point they're trying to make is that these spies should have seen what happened to Miriam, seen how she was punished for speaking derogatorily when she shouldn't, and that should have been a lesson to them that they should be careful with how they speak derogatorily about something. And because they didn't take the lesson from that, that's why this entire catastrophe happened. If they would have gone ahead and they would have learned the lesson from Miriam about what it means how serious it is to speak Lashon Hara, then that seemingly would have prevented the entire story. But as Rashi says, as the Medrash says, Ra'u, they saw what happened and they did not take the lesson from it.
But he looks sometimes like this private conversation.
Oh, good point. So you're asking, it was a private conversation. That's how it started.
Yeah.
But after the conversation happened, Hashem said to Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam to come forth. Hashem spoke to all three of them and rebuked Aaron and Miriam. After Hashem finished speaking with them, Miriam was stricken with saras. Because of that, the Jewish people had to wait for her, as the Torah says specifically. So it wasn't private anymore.
But they understand what is reason.
Yeah. Yes. The fact that this happened so publicly, yes, they knew why it happened. Okay. Now, it's interesting, just a couple of points here, and that is that, when the story of Miriam happened, so if you follow the order of the Chumash, it happened before they were sent as spies. So it's not like they knew they were going to be sent as spies. But this episode with Miriam was something that they should have learned from it the severity of speaking Lashon Hara. It's not like, well, we're about to go and spy out and bring back a report, and now we'll make a connection between, what happened to Miriam and what we might say. They didn't know they were going to be spies. But the fact of what happened to Miriam should be a lesson to them about the severity of Lashon Hara, and it should have become such an internalized message to them that when now they had to speak, that they would learn how careful they have to be about what they say.
But Lashon Hara, usually we talk something wrong about person. This is what.
Okay, good question. Good question. So you're asking a question about Lashon Hara is about a person.
Yeah.
There was no person involved here. So that's a very good question. I wasn't planning on speaking about that tonight, but I will try to give you a little bit of an answer that I thought of. I'm not going to call it fully worked out, but yeah. But when they spoke Lashon Hara, when they spoke about the land, right? Who were they speaking Lashon Hara about? The land? Or was it also Lashon Hara about, to a certain degree, about Hashem? Hashem tells them, I'm going to give you a great land, and you can go in and conquer, and it's a great land. And the spies come back and say, no, it's not going to work so well. And not only that, Rashi brings down that they did make some kind of a comment. They did express themselves as that Hashem won't be able to do it for us. So there, if you want to know technically, is it Lashon Hara because Lashon Hara is about people, they didn't speak about people? Maybe technically it wasn't. But what they were speaking regarding, they should have understood that even if it's not technically Lashon Hara, they need to be very careful about what they're talking about. Even if you want to say they're talking about Eretz Yisrael. You're right, technically it's not Lashon Hara, but it's Eretz Yisrael. And they should understand what they're talking about. And understand that even if it's not technically Lashon Hara, but you need to be careful about what you say. Perhaps. Okay. So but again, the point here is they saw it and they didn't take the lesson. Which really means that there's a lesson here that when something happens in front of you, you see an event, that you have to be ready to learn from it. These men, maybe you could say, well, that happened to Miriam, it didn't happen to us. I mean, we didn't speak Lashon Hara, she spoke Lashon Hara. But the point is that when something like this happens in front of you, right? She's Miriam. She's an important woman. She's a prophetess. The Rambam talks about how her Lashon Hara about Moshe was on a very low level, very low grade Lashon Hara. And still she was punished. Saras is a serious punishment. And it was public. Nonetheless, so that's a lesson about Lashon Hara. And if it's happening in front of you, it's not something for you to ignore. It's something for you to learn from. And as Rashi says, they saw it. They saw the whole thing. It was right in front of them. But they didn't take the lesson. Because there is a tendency that when something happens to somebody else, it's like, oh, that's them. But the challenge is the point is that when something happens to you, especially on such a scale, that you take a lesson from it. So I'll tell you a story. I'm sure I've said this story before, but it's really a good story to bring out this kind of point. So many people have stories in Israel. They get a ride with a taxi driver. The taxi driver starts talking, and they have a lot of interesting things to say. So there was a rabbi in a taxi, and the taxi driver tells him, I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you what happened to me. I got out of the army, and like many young people did and still do, if they can and when they can, they go traveling. They leave Israel and they go traveling around the world. They go to all the places where you and I would never go, probably. And him and a group of friends went to Africa. I think it was Africa. Okay? And they pitched a tent and they slept outside. One night they wake up and they hear one of the friends is screaming. He's gasping. There's something going on. There's something wrong. And they go into his tent and they see that a large snake has wrapped itself around him and it was going to kill him. And they tried pulling off the snake and hitting the snake. It wasn't happening. So finally, the person who was almost about to die, what did he do? He screamed, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And the snake left him. The snake unraveled itself and slithered away. When he got back to Israel, this person who had this miracle became what's called a Chazer B'Tshuvah. He became fully observant. That was the end of the story. So the rabbi says to the taxi driver, and what about you? His response was, didn't happen to me. Yeah. I'm saying the story brings out the point so much.
I like this story.
It's such a strong point in the sense that it's right in front of you. What's the matter with you? But this is a tendency. This is what people do. And that's what happened to these people also. They did it. Something happened right in front of them. Miriam was stricken with saras. Miriam, everybody knows about it. No one's traveling because of her. And they didn't apply to themselves. So I'll tell you, I'll mention another story that perhaps I've said before. I'm sure I have said it before. But again, it brings out the point very strong. So they're in Portland, Oregon. This happened a number of years ago. Portland, Oregon was like many other cities. It used to have a community Orthodox shul. That shul, died out. And the only, other, places of worship were conservative, reform, whatever it was. So it was in Portland, and it was one Yom Kippur night, Kol Nidre night. And a Kol Nidre night, we take out the Torahs from the Aron, from the Ark, and there was a man holding the Torah. And as he was holding the Torah, he collapsed. And when he collapsed, the Torah hit the floor.
Fainted?
He fainted. And the Torah hit the floor. And everybody was aghast for a double reason. He collapsed and the Torah hit the floor. And one of the congregants said, when this happened, he was, of course, everyone was shocked. And he suggested the following. If the Torah falls to the ground, that means that we're not supporting the Torah. That's what he took from this. And that became the impetus to hire the first Orthodox rabbi in 40 years. That's something that happens, and it shakes you up. And there's something just telling you, there's something that's just telling you, like, what's going on here. So what you should be doing is taking the lesson. And some people still don't do that. But just as another example of when something shocking happened and they took the lesson from it.
But what they blame?
They blame the fact that because they're not observing the Torah enough, they're not supporting the Torah fell.
Not because of the man, but because of the congregation.
Well, the man collapsed, but he was trying to see it in a bigger picture. There was a message here. That's the point. When something happens to you like that, you can ignore it or you can take the message. You're supposed to take the message. And then a third story, which, is a story that's not about, something dramatic happening, but something that it's a message. So Rabbi Yitzchak Rabinowitz from Baltimore, he's a famous speaker, and he tells a story regarding himself. He's originally from Seattle, Washington. And when his mother got older, I'm assuming, I don't know if she was moving to Baltimore or from then on Pesach was going to be made in Baltimore. So all her Pesach dishes were going to be shipped to Baltimore. So he went down to Seattle and he packed up the dishes, and him and his mother drove to the post office to mail the dishes. And he told her, when we get to the post office, do not carry any of the boxes. It's too hard for you. It's not good for you. Don't carry any of the boxes. Don't carry any of the boxes. Okay? So they drive to the post office. He gets out of the car, goes to the trunk, taking a box from the trunk. What does his mother do? She gets out of the car, goes to the back seat, opens the door, and starts taking out a box. And he says, Ma, I told you, it's not good for you. You can't do it. So he goes to the back seat to pick out the box. What does she do? She goes to the trunk to take out the box. And he again tells her, Ma, it's not, you can't do it. Don't do it. So there was a man standing by, amused at what's going on. And he, got Rabbi Fran's attention. He winked at him. And he said, with a smile, he rolls his eyes. He goes, mothers. So Rabbi Fran says, isn't that the truth? And then the man said, well, be glad you still have one. That's a message. It's a message, private message. But again, the challenge is, will you take the message or not take the message? And that's what happened here by the spies. The spies had a message to learn. They had an event, a dramatic event, and they had what to learn. But they didn't learn it. They ignored it. And that was, and really the Torah is telling us, because they ignored the message, everything that we read about happened. And it's a lesson of how important it is that when something happens to us, that we should understand that it's a message from Hashem. Something happens around us. So if it happens to us, it's also a message for sure. But when something happens around us, we have to see it as a message from Hashem and not ignore it. There are great people who could look at everything and learn from it. Any little thing that happened around them, they learn from it. But here we're talking about things that are more, they get to you, they jar you, they wake you up, they surprise, they shock you. It's not there for nothing. It's there to learn a message from.
But what happens if there is no story with Miriam?
That's true too.
But there is no lessons.
What do you mean if there's no story with Miriam? What do you mean? I'm sorry.
No, there's no story with Miriam.
Yeah.
That happens the same thing.
Yes, but the point here is they had the chance to learn. If the lesson but the story of Miriam did happen, and they had the chance to learn from it, and they should have, and they didn't.
But it seems the same thing.
I know what you mean. It's the same thing, but the point is they had a way of saving themselves. They had a way of getting out of this.
But historically, what happens the same thing.
Okay, but there's a lesson there. There's a lesson. The lesson that Torah is trying. If they would have learned the lesson from what happened, they had a chance to avoid all of this. And that's the lesson. When something happens, learn from it. Take the messages that are there. Don't ignore the messages.
But if somebody would remember this, if people read the story first time,
they're not going to make the connection.
No, but first time.
Yeah.
And there is, in first pasuk you read, there is best people. They walk, and there is, nobody's predict what happened. Why is this is what happened? Right. Why they decided to
that's a whole different discussion.
Okay.
And yes, it is not in the psukim what was going on in their minds. Okay. Now, the next thing I'd like to go to is further on in the parasha. Well, actually, let's just take a look before we go further on, where I want to share an item with you, is that in Pasuk Tezayin, verse 16, after the list of all the names of the spies. So one of the spies, which is in verse 8, is from the tribe of Ephraim, and his name is Hoshea bin Nun. That's his name, Hoshea bin Nun. And then when you look in Pasuk, verse Tes Zayin, 16, the Pasuk says, these are the names of the men that Moshe had sent to spy the land. Vayikra Moshe LaHoshea ben Nun Yehoshua. Moshe called Hoshea ben Nun Yehoshua. So the famous Yehoshua, disciple of Moshe, the successor of Moshe, as a leader of the Jewish people, his original name was Hoshea, and here the Torah says Moshe changed his name, added the letter Yud. And Rashi tells us He added the letter Yud because the letter Yud represents Hashem's name, which starts with the letter Yud. Hoshea means save. So Yud Hoshea means Hashem should save. Hashem should save you. From what? From the plan of the spies. Moshe already, according to what Rashi is saying, which is really a medrash, Moshe already knew that these spies did not have a good attitude here.
He knew?
He realized they did not have a good attitude here. The Jewish people, again, according to Rashi, the Jewish people, getting the way the whole Rashi works, Rashi learns this whole story. The Jewish people didn't have a good attitude. Moshe knew that the spies were not going to have a good attitude. How did he know exactly? I don't know. That's a good thing to discuss also. But Moshe knew, and he davened for Yoshua. He davened for Yeshua, which means if he wouldn't have davened for Yoshua, Yoshua was in danger, being, sucked up into what these other men were going to do. Moshe davened from that it shouldn't happen. Now, we also know there was one other spy who did not follow the rest of his colleagues, and that was Kalev. Okay? And Moshe didn't daven for Kalev. Okay? But Kalev, somehow or another, pulled himself out of it. Now, if we look later on in the parsha, after the sin of the spies, after the Jewish people cry, and Hashem is telling Moshe they're not going to enter the land. Hashem first wants to destroy the Jewish people, and Moshe davens that he shouldn't kill the Jewish people. So then Hashem says, "I accept your prayer. I will not destroy them, but they're not going to enter the land of Israel." Now, in Pasuk, this is now Perek Yudala, chapter 14. Pasuk Chaf Dalet 24. Well, actually, let's look at 23. They shall not see the land that I swore to their forefathers. And all those who anger me shall not see it. Va'avdi Kalev, and my servant Kalev, because he had a different spirit with him, and he followed me wholeheartedly. I shall bring him to the land that he came there, and his children shall inherit it. Now, when it says that he will get the land that he came there, Rashi tells us before that Kalev, when he was in Hebron, he kind of left the rest of the group, and he went to Maras HaMachpelah, where our Avos are buried, obviously mice are buried, and he prayed there. Which means Kalev knew what kind of danger he was in, and he went to pray that he should be saved.
But his own, I believe they both went to pray.
No.
No?
It says Kalev did. It doesn't say Yeshua did. Not that I'm aware of. It says Kalev did that. Okay. So the Orach Chaim wants to know, commentary Orach Chaim wants to know, why is it only Avdi Kalev? Why is only Kalev my servant? Because he had a different spirit. Didn't Yoshua also have a different spirit? Didn't Yoshua also not follow the rest of the spies? Why is the only one being called my servant Kalev and not Yoshua? That's the question. So Orach Chaim explains, it's a very interesting answer. Orach Chaim explains, because Yoshua and Kalev really were in as much as, they were the ones who stood up to the rest of their colleagues. They're the ones. Kalev was the first one to say that we should go into the land, and later on they both said we should go into the land. But they really faced their challenge was very different. Orach Chaim says, if Moshe davened for Yoshua that he should be saved, then that minimized the challenge for Yoshua. There's a concept where Orach Chaim says a tzaddik can pray for someone else's spirituality. Maybe everybody can do that too. But Moshe's prayers on behalf of Yoshua really minimized Yoshua's challenge here. Kalev didn't have that. Kalev's challenge was much bigger. Kalev actually, the fact that you see that he went to pray, he broke off from the rest of the group and he went to pray, shows you that he really felt the pressure, that he really was in danger of being sucked into this plan of the rest of the spies to speak badly about the land of Canaan. He really had to deal with this challenge because he was being influenced. He knew that he could fall under their influence. And that's why he went to pray. Yeshua never had that problem. Moshe prayed on his behalf. Kalev had to basically find within himself to try to not allow himself to get, pulled into what the rest of the spies were doing. And therefore, you know why he's called, says Arachai, and why is he called my servant? Because he had a challenge. The Yetzer Hara was already working on him. The evil inclination was working on him, but he overcame. But he overcame. Therefore, he's called my servant. Yeshua didn't have that challenge. But Kalev, who already felt the pressure, he felt the challenge, so much so that he had to go and pray that he shouldn't fall in, that means the challenge is really there. But he overcame it. And because of that, he's called my servant. That's how you get the title my servant. And the way to read the pasuk is, Va'avdi Kalev, and my servant Kalev, Ekev Hayisa, because there was, or actually the way the Arachaim explains it, as a result. You want to know why he's called my servant Kalev? Ekev, because Ruach Hayisa Ruach Acheres Imai, there was another spirit with him. That means there was a spirit other than the spirit of Hashem. There was a spirit other than the spirit, the proper spirit. He had a Ruach Acheres, had a different spirit. He had a different spirit, nonetheless, Vayamale Acharei, but he wholeheartedly followed me. He had a Ruach Acheres. He had one Acheres than following Hashem. But nonetheless, he did it. And that's how the Arachaim explains the pasuk. Va'avdi, my servant Kalev, because he had a Ruach Acheres, had a different spirit, a spirit that was pushing him not to follow what Hashem wants. Vayamale Acharei, but nonetheless, he wholeheartedly followed me. That's why he's called my servant. And with this, following the same idea, there is an interesting statement made in the Mishnah in Kedushin. Okay, ready for this statement? Tov Sheberofim. What does Tov Sheberofim mean? What does it sound like?
Good for a doctor.
The good of the doctors, or the best of the doctors, Legehenim.
It's clear.
He goes to Gehenim. That's what it seems like it's saying. The best of the doctors, to Gehenim.
That's what it's saying.
That's what it sounds like.
Best of the doctor.
That means the best of the doctors, the best doctor, Legehenim. He's going to Gehenim. That's what the words seem to say.
Right. What does it mean?
What does it mean? So that the commentary to Beth Israel in Mishnayos explains it, following the same idea. The best of the doctors faces a very big challenge. Because they're the best, they think they're the best. And because they think they're the best, they can be arrogant and not think through what they're doing. They're so confident in themselves that when someone comes to them, they take it for granted. They know exactly what's the problem. They don't speak to others. They don't, as he says, research the medications. Again, he's talking in his, in the form of medicine practice then. I mean, not to say that shouldn't be this way either, but it means that when the doctor has that chance, right? When the doctor, he's the best of the doctors and he knows it, so he can become arrogant, and he could actually kill someone because he was arrogant and he didn't think through the situation well enough, or he didn't accept questions, or he didn't speak to other people. So Tov Sheberofim Gehenna means the best of the doctors. It doesn't say he's going to Gehenna. It says the best of the doctors to Gehenna, which means if he's the best of the doctors, he has the potential of landing up in Gehenna. But if he doesn't do that, let's say he's the best of the doctors, but he overcomes that challenge, and he is humble, and he is careful, and he is patient, and he does speak to others, and he's careful about what he does, then on the contrary, that's actually it's a praise. If he has taken what should be that has the potential to drive him to Gehenna, but he doesn't allow that to happen, that means he overcame that challenge, then that's a tremendous praise. So the Tov Sheberofim Gehenna doesn't mean the best doctors, he's going to Gehenna. It's actually a way of saying the best of the doctors, he has what it takes, he has the potential, he has the challenge to go to Gehenna. But if he doesn't, but if he overcomes that challenge, then on the contrary, he's accomplished something very great. He's overcome the challenge, he's overcome the Yetzer Hara, and now he deserves the title of Eved Hashem, the servant of God. Have a wonderful evening.
But what to do? To go to the best doctor? Just